Cortland Simmons with you here at the CS Racing Report, and we're going to recap the 2018 edition of the Los Al Futurity on this 13th day of December in the year of our Lord 2018. And Bob BAFFERT has won this race, or had won this race, 10 times coming in, won every edition of this Los Al Futurity since it had been switched from Hollywood Park to Los Alamitos. And he came in with two very interesting prospects, Improbable, who was ultra impressive on the Breeders' Cup Day 1 undercard to the Juvenile and Juvenile fillies with a 7 1/4 length rout of his opposition in the Street Sense Stakes in his second start over the Churchill Surface. And then he also had a son of 2013 Breeders' Cup Classic winner, Macho Man with Mucho Gusto, who was very impressive in the local prep, the Bob Hope Stakes Grade 3, in which he beat a Richard Mandela horse by the name of Extra Hope, who had won around 2 turns, who was cutting back in distance. And a lot of people were putting money on him that he would appreciate the added route of ground in the Los Alamitos Futurity. So BAFFERT had 2 horses, 2 for 2 coming into this race, along with Dueling, a horse that didn't have a troubled trip in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile in Louisville. He just had trouble accelerating with those other horses, and he finished off the board. He was coming in trying to redeem himself. Interestingly enough, in the beginning of the race might have been as exciting as the finish itself, for the simple fact that Savagery lived up to his name. He did just that to his rivals. Floating, Extra Hope, and Dueling, who got the worst of it, way out wide. Dueling ended up being out in the parking lot, having to weave his way back onto the racetrack through cars and through some of the crowd there at Los Al. That's not actually what happened, but he got floated pretty much almost all the way out to the outside of the racetrack, and he really did a good job of being able to get back into contention on the backside, being a joint fourth. And as the race caller announced, at the head of the stretch, the race was wide open when he rushed into contention, and then he flattened out. It looked like he was going to threaten, and he flattened out. He could be excused based on those unideal circumstances. So he's going to be a horse that I think is going to have some value. He looks to be, to me, a horse that you got to keep an eye on. If he can get a straightforward, clean trip, or even if he doesn't have quite the trouble that he had in this race, he could be a horse that could be dangerous if there's some pace set up. And this race certainly had it. Mucho Gusto went out to the lead, carved out 23.25 in the quarter mile, 47.2, which is 47 1 in real time for the half, 111.82 for the 3/4 of a mile, and then 134.79 for the mile. And then Improbable sprouted wings, rushed up, and put the afterburners on, and basically hit jet stream and kicked away from his opposition, winning by 5 in a sparkling time of 141.18 for the mile and a 16th. That is comparable, and it stacks up against any 3-year-old or handicap horse in the United States or anywhere else for that matter. So a frightening performance like this is something that's going to send shivers down the spine of opposing trainers and the connections of possible Derby candidates if this horse continues to run the way that he has in his first 3 starts. He won't win the Heisman Trophy. He'll get an invitation to go to New York, but game winner is going to be your 2-year-old champion with the 3 Grade 1 wins. Keep in mind, the Eclipse Awards aren't actually held in New York like the Heisman Trophy, but just to make the analogy, he has at least made himself a finalist, even though he won't be awarded. But what's most important is that he is a serious Kentucky Derby contender if he continues to do what he's doing at this current time in the new calendar year of 2019. Keep in mind, he's also has the same look as Justify. He's a spitting, almost like a twin brother. He's by City Zip. For those of you who may not be encouraged by that sprinting prowess, he's by an AP&D mare, and he seems to be running, he's living up to that side of his pedigree with the way he's performing at this point. Owned by the same ownership group as Justify, Windstar Farm and China Horse Club, along with Starlight Racing, same trainers, Bob BAFFERT. Big bankroll, looks like the same scenario all over again, deja vu, but we shall see. What's going to be interesting is Drayden Van Dyke, who's ridden this horse in both of these starts, was the initial rider for Justify. Rode him in his first race before he got jocked off from Mike Smith. Will he keep the mount in this particular situation? Keep in mind, though, BAFFERT has a big brigade, and between him and Mike Smith and Flavian Pratt and some of the regular riders that BAFFERT employs, it'll be interesting to see how all these riders will sort it out, but there is a good chance that Drayden Van Dyke might stick like Velcro to Improbable. He's very impressive. As again, he won it by 5 lengths in a very nice time of 141.18. Sat back, stalked the pace, relaxed, and really showed that professionalism. he did climb a little bit in the street sense with the kickback and all that, and that's going to be a concern. That's a little quirk that he's going to have to get over, particularly if he does make it to the Derby with a 20-horse field, where whether the track, no matter what the track condition, there is going to be some kickback. But he seems to have the tactical talent to be able to make his own trip and be attainable to the pace. That was a pretty torrid pace, or certainly a legitimate one. He relaxed nicely, and then he showed, as I said, that 7th or 8th or 9th gear, which is unusual because, as we all know, vehicles only have 6, and this horse is a Maserati, Porsche, one of these, muscle car type of horses. And as Bob BAFFERT described Vindication years ago, this horse might end up being another one of those paparazzi horses. So look out for Improbable. Very impressive winner of the Los Alamitos Futurity by 5 lengths in 141.18 to run his record to 3 wins in as many starts for trainer Bob BAFFERT with Mucho Gusto. Second, Extra Hope finished a very credible third. Dueling was moved up from 5th to 4th ahead of Savagery, who was DQ'd for his antics on the first turn. So that is, the order of finish in terms of your top 4 in the Los Al. What's going to be interesting is where do these horses fit in the grand scheme of things? It's looking like the California contingent is basically showing its superiority, at least for now. But it'll be interesting to see when they ship out, because a couple of them will, from Santa Anita, as to how they'll stack up against some of the horses, many of which that have to redeem themselves on the East Coast. There's a few of them in ICU and at treatment centers to get rehabilitation for some of the bruises and bumps from being destroyed in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile by Game Winner, another Bob BAFFERT horse, and as I aforementioned, will be the 2018 2-year-old champion and the early Kentucky Derby favorite. But once again, we'll find out a lot more about all these 3-year-olds in terms of where they stack up when we start blending and cross-pollinating these horses competitively. So once again, here at the CS Racing Report, and recapping the Los Alamitos Futurity for 2018, Improbable, the son of City Zip, out of an AP Indy mare, impressively wins the Los Alamitos Futurity by 5 emphatic lengths in 141.18 for Hall of Fame trainer Bob BAFFERT.
Here comes Improbable to join the leaders. Improbable down the stand side, challenging stablemate Mucho Gusto, and he's taken over. Improbable to the outside of Mucho Gusto, who's trying to battle back to the inside, and the 2 BAFFERT trainees have pulled away from the others, but it's Improbable doing the best work. Improbable well on his way to remain undefeated, and now a Grade 1 winner. Fantastic in the Futurity. He won by almost 5.